You've seen his face 100 times, even if you never knew his name. Richard Jaeckel was everywhere. Gritty war films, dusty westerns, cop dramas, and even lifeguard-packed beach shows. He was the man Hollywood called when it needed someone tough, reliable, and real. Not a matinee idol, not a heartthrob, but something more grounded and authentic. For over 50 years, he was the backbone of films and television shows that defined American masculinity. But then, something happened. Bit by bit, he faded, not in scandal or disgrace, but in something far more painful: silence. Jaeckel's story is one of subtle greatness. He wasn't the guy storming red carpets with sunglasses and ego. He was the one crouched in a foxhole on screen, clutching a rifle, making you believe every second of it. From his breakout role in Guadalcanal Diary to iconic performances in The Dirty Dozen and Sometimes a Great Notion he gave everything he had to each part. Despite his dedication, accolades, and even an Academy Award nomination, Jaeckel never reached the A-list, and more tragically, Hollywood never intended for him to. For decades, he worked relentlessly, appearing in more than 150 film and television productions. His was a life devoted to craft, not fame. He didn't play the game or chase headlines, and eventually, Hollywood turned its back. Not with a fall from grace, but by simply moving on without him. When his time came, there were no parades, no primetime tributes, just a whisper, a quiet goodbye to a man who helped build the foundation of classic American cinema. What happened to Richard Jaeckel in his final years isn't just surprising, it's heartbreaking. Because his story isn't one of failure, but of quiet devotion and cruel neglect. Jaeckel didn't grow up in the glow of movie lights or with dreams of stardom. Born in 1926 in Long Beach, New York, he moved with his family to Los Angeles as a child. Fate took an unexpected turn while he was working a regular job as a mailboy at 20th Century Fox. At just 17, with no acting experience or connections, he was cast in Guadalcanal Diary a major war film released in 1943. That role launched a career that would span over half a century. From the beginning, Jaeckel stood out, not for charm or polish, but for something you couldn't fake: grit. His roles were never flashy, but they left a mark. He looked like he had lived the stories he portrayed, and even in small parts, he brought an authenticity that elevated the whole production. Behind the steely on-screen presence was a man described by colleagues as kind, humble, and deeply professional. He never tried to steal the spotlight or act like he was above anyone. He showed up on time, knew his lines, hit his marks, and treated everyone on set with respect. But in a town that rewards the loud and self-promoting, that humility may have worked against him. While others chased headlines, Jaeckel simply kept working. He loved acting for what it was, not as a path to celebrity, but as a craft worth mastering. Whether playing a hardened soldier or a small-town sheriff, there was always something simmering beneath his performances, a quiet tension, a depth that never demanded attention, but commanded it anyway. Still, even with a strong body of work and the admiration of peers, the spotlight always seemed just out of reach. Hollywood never quite knew what to do with a man who was both a tough guy and a tender soul. Yet, Jaeckel proved time and again that he was more than a supporting actor. He was a fighter, on screen and off. And by the time the 1960s arrived, he had carved out a reputation as a reliable character actor producers could trust to deliver, no matter how demanding the part. His big break came in 1967 with The Dirty Dozen a brutal World War II action film packed with Hollywood heavyweights. Amid the star-studded cast, Jaeckel stood tall, not the loudest, but often the most believable. That authenticity resonated with audiences and critics alike. Then in 1971, he gave perhaps his most emotionally raw performance in Sometimes a Great Notion portraying a hardened, emotionally wounded logger. That role earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, the peak of his critical acclaim and a moment that should have launched a new phase in his career. But even with that Oscar nod, the phones didn't start ringing. There were no major offers or multi-million-dollar contracts. Instead, Jaeckel went back to what he always did, the grind. He returned to taking smaller, tougher roles, supportive, understated parts that never made headlines but always mattered. It was a brutal reminder that in Hollywood, there's a ceiling for actors like Jaeckel. He was valued for his grit but rarely celebrated. For all his hard work, for all his talent, the system never knew how to reward him. And as the industry became flashier and more image-obsessed, Jaeckel's quiet strength began to fade into the background. Behind the scenes, that invisibility took its toll. Took a toll. Richard Jaeckel was not one to complain. He was a working man through and through, but those close to him said there were moments of deep frustration. He watched as others with less talent but more charisma rose to the top. He saw the industry shift away from the character-driven stories he loved toward effects-driven blockbusters. And yet, through it all, he kept showing up, doing the work, no matter how small the role or how far he had fallen from center stage. The battle off-screen was just as intense as the ones he fought on camera, a battle for relevance, for respect, for purpose. Though he rarely let it show, those battles left scars that deepened as he entered the final phase of his career, a phase defined by perseverance, but also quiet heartbreak. Because despite everything Richard Jaeckel gave to his craft, Hollywood had already begun to forget him. Jaeckel was never the kind of actor to slow down. While others took breaks or left the business, he kept working. From the 1940s through the 1990s, he rarely let more than a few months pass without stepping onto a set. His resume grew longer each year, eventually boasting over 150 film and television credits. For most actors, even half that number would be a dream. For Jaeckel, it was just the life he had chosen. As the film industry evolved, he adapted. In the 1980s and early 1990s, he became a familiar face on television, appearing in shows like Baywatch*, Starman*, and Spencer, for hire star. He was rarely the lead, but often the best part of any episode he was in. Viewers may not have known his name, but they trusted his face. When Richard Jaeckel appeared, you knew something real was about to unfold. But behind that tireless work ethic was a man running low on options. As Hollywood chased younger, flashier stars, the phone rang less. His roles grew smaller, background characters, one-scene parts, gruff men with a few lines. There were no more Oscar-caliber offers coming in. Still, he treated each role with the same intensity and dedication he always had. Then, in the early 1990s, something changed. The sharpness in his eyes dulled. He began missing calls, forgetting lines, losing weight. At first it was subtle, but those around him grew concerned. In 1994, Jaeckel was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The cruelest twist of all, he could no longer work. For a man whose entire identity had been tied to acting, stepping away from the screen felt like a slow-motion collapse. There was no farewell tour, no magazine covers, no final interviews. His exit from the industry was as quiet as his entry had been. One day he was a familiar face on screen, and the next, he was gone. That's when the real struggle began. If Hollywood had forgotten him during his prime, what followed was even more unforgivable. By the mid-1990s, Richard Jaeckel's body was failing, but his spirit remained strong. After a lifetime of grueling shoot schedules and relentless performances, his final fight was the most personal and devastating. At 70 years old, his illness advanced quickly, draining the strength that had once defined him. The acting career that had sustained him for over 5 decades came to an abrupt halt, and the industry he had given so much to seemed to forget he had ever existed. The real heartbreak came with the financial truth. Despite his lengthy career and hundreds of credits, Jaeckel did not have the money people might have assumed. Medical bills piled up. His family, already emotionally overwhelmed, faced an impossible burden. The man who had once acted alongside legends like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood was moved into the Motion Picture and Television Fund Home in Woodland Hills, a care facility for industry veterans in need. There were no red carpet fundraisers, no statement from studios, no grand gestures, just silence. The same silence that had followed him as his roles shrank and his name faded. It was a bitter reminder that in Hollywood, loyalty does not guarantee legacy. Working-class actors, no matter how prolific, are often forgotten when the spotlight moves on. But Jaeckel's story did not end entirely in darkness. When fans and former colleagues learned of his condition, many were stunned. A grassroots wave of support began. Donations came in, not millions, but enough to make a difference. Former co-stars quietly pitched in. Viewers who had grown up watching him sent letters of support. It wasn't the grand ending he deserved, but it was something real, a sign that while the industry had turned away, the people had not. Through it all, Jaeckel remained humble. He never complained publicly or lashed out at the system that had failed him. If he was angry, he never showed it. He focused on the time he had left, the people who stood by him, and the work he had already given to the world. Yet, his final chapter raised an unsettling question. How could a man who gave so much to Hollywood end up with so little in return? Heartbreakingly, the most silent moment was yet to come. Richard Jaeckel spent his final days in a modest room at the Motion Picture and Television Fund Home in Woodland Hills, California, far from the movie sets, red carpets, and sound stages that had defined his life. He faded quietly into the background of an industry that had once relied on his face to tell its most enduring stories. There were no gripping documentaries, no primetime in memoriam specials queued up. For many, Richard Jaeckel's disappearance from the public eye was quiet, almost too quiet. On June 14, 1997, he passed away at the age of 70. The cause was cancer, a battle he fought bravely and without complaint. His death barely made a ripple in the entertainment world. A few trade publications mentioned it, and a couple of television retrospectives offered a brief nod. But the media, so quick to shower tribute on flashier names, had little to say for a man who had appeared in over 150 roles, many of them iconic. The silence was deafening. Yet those who knew him best remembered a different kind of farewell. His sons, Barry and Richard Jr., spoke of a father who never let bitterness take hold. Despite his illness, he remained grounded and calm, just as he had always been. He did not fear the end, he accepted it. And while the industry may have forgotten him, his family never did, nor did the fans who continued to rediscover his work through late-night reruns and classic film channels. It wasn't just his death that was quiet, it was the decades leading up to it. There were no scandals, no Hollywood meltdowns, no attention-grabbing interviews, just consistent, disciplined work. The kind of work that keeps the wheels of cinema turning. The kind that rarely gets celebrated but always matters. Some of the actors who once shared scenes with him went on to win multiple awards, land multi-million-dollar deals, and enjoy legacy status. Meanwhile, Jaeckel left this world without a mansion, without a fortune, and without the full credit he deserved. He had been the unsung backbone of countless productions, always delivering, never demanding. And in the end, it was that quiet dignity that defined him more than any headline ever could. His life hadn't ended in disgrace or controversy, but in something perhaps even harder to swallow, obscurity. And for a man who had given everything to his craft, that obscurity felt almost cruel. But the story doesn't end there. Because what Richard Jaeckel's life represented, and what it revealed about Hollywood's forgotten heroes, is something we're still reckoning with. When people look back on the golden years of American cinema, they often focus on the stars, the headline makers, the box office titans, the names etched into awards and sidewalks. But the truth is, Hollywood would not have survived without its Richards. Richard Jaeckel was never the face on the poster, but he was the one who made the poster matter. He brought gravity to action scenes, humanity to war films, and an unshakable realism to stories that might otherwise have felt hollow. He wasn't just a background player, he was the soul behind the spectacle. And yet, for all of that, he was left behind, not because he failed, but because he never chased fame the way others did. He didn't play Hollywood politics. He didn't hire publicists to spin narratives or make headlines for personal drama. Instead, he let his work speak for itself. Unfortunately, in an industry that often forgets those who don't scream for attention, his quiet dignity became a double-edged sword. His story raises a hard question. Why do some actors get immortalized while others vanish into footnotes? Richard Jaeckel gave 5 decades of his life to the screen. He delivered Oscar-nominated performances. He stood shoulder to shoulder with icons. He earned the respect of his peers, his directors, and his audiences. And yet, in the end, his name was missing from most of the tributes. There were no major Lifetime Achievement Awards, no re-releases of his best films, just a slow, quiet fade into memory. But for those who watched him work, for the fans who remember the intensity in his eyes, the honesty in his performances, and the strength he brought to every scene, Richard Jaeckel was unforgettable. More than that, he was a reminder that greatness in Hollywood isn't always about headlines or ticket sales. Sometimes, it's about consistency, commitment, and integrity. Jaeckel may have died without riches, without accolades, and without widespread fame, but he left behind something far more enduring, a body of work that continues to speak for itself and a legacy that, while too often ignored, remains etched into the foundation of American film history. So if you ever find yourself flipping through channels and you see him, maybe in uniform, maybe on horseback, maybe staring down danger with that quiet intensity, pause for a moment. Because that man, the one whose name you might not know, was one of the finest to ever do it. Richard Jaeckel didn't need the spotlight to shine. He just needed a camera, and he made every frame count.